There is no such thing as single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. Hi guys, welcome to this episode of Clarity on Intersectionality. Today with us we have Anindya, Saheyba, Pratyaksh, Rudra and myself Akshat, the students of Jindal Global Law School, and in this podcast we'll try to understand intersectionality, its discourse in Patanjamanwali case, and its coherence across academic writings of Sunana Arya and Akash Singh Rathore. Without further ado, let's try to understand the origins of intersectionality. The seeds or the blueprint of intersectionality was first observed in Sojourner Truth's voice in her spontaneous speech, Ain't I a Woman, in 1851, where she asks that isn't she a woman, and instead of more oppression and problems, doesn't she also deserve equal rights and treatment as white women? 138 years later, Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989 coined the term intersectionality, a way of understanding social relations by examining intersecting forms of discriminations. Crenshaw argues that we have made frames to identify problems and solve them, and when in a case a problem does not have a frame, the chances of it being identified, let alone solved, are almost reduced to zero. Crenshaw backs this observation by giving an example of a black woman, Emma T. Griffin, who was discriminated on the basis of gender and race at her workplace. The court held that by allowing Emma to file a case on both the grounds, she'll have two swings at the bat, while the other people, like women who are discriminated on gender and people who have been discriminated on their race, will only have one swing at the bat, which kinds of provide Emma with her privilege and disregarded her case. According to Crenshaw, what the court erred in observing was that although Emma would get two swings at the bat if allowed to hold her case on the two grounds, but at the same time she has also been doubly marginalized by facing the problems of a women and black people. While these set of voices do pose a new perspective, there is another set of academia which poses intersectionality as a means rather than a solution. Very well structured by Miss Mary Jones, that intersectionality is not the magic key to solve the problem of the people who disappear at cross section, but at very least a definition to the problem. We still have to find ways to forge that magic key which will solve the problem of these people. Mary also argues that there is no doubly or triply marginalized people, like a black woman has to face the sufferings of a white woman as well as that of a black man. It is not simply addition but a bunch of whole different set of problems which can often be brutal and fatal. Nordic feminist activist Christian Havensgard Lassen also points out that intersectionality is not the destination but a mere trip plan, and we still have to think about our mode of transportation to reach our destination. In his paper Intersectionality, yes, but how? Moving ahead, we have Anindya explaining upon how a young woman who was from a lower caste class and was visually impaired by birth was raped in broad daylight, and how the judges dealt with this problem in their judgment. Over to you, Anindya.
Indeed, a case of brutality, it holds consequential essence which, unlike in the case of Emma de Griffin, holds the significance for the emphasis of intersectionality in its entirety of reasoning. It is imperative to use an intersectional lens to evaluate how multiple sources of oppression operate, culminating in producing a specific experience of subordination for a blind scheduled caste woman. The facts of the case follow, where the appeal is in response to the division bench of the Andhra Pradesh High Court ruling on August 3, 2019. A case of caste and gender where the High Court upheld the appellant's conviction on charges on the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Prevention Atrocity Act 1989 and Section 376 of the Indian Penal Code. The appellant has received a life sentence in jail for each of the aforementioned crimes, with the substantive sentences to run concurrently. The accused, who is the appellant, worked along with the brothers of the victim and visited the house frequently of the mother of the victim. The victim is just a girl of 19 years of age and blind by birth. The appellant was residing in Gajupali village and used to meet the family frequently while carrying out manual work for 2 years prior to the incident. On the day of the incident around 9 am on March 31st, 2011, the mother of the victim was conducting domestic chores whilst the father of the victim was chopping the firewoods with his sons when the appellant visited and inquired about them. The mother told the appellant about the father and the sons chopping the firewoods and asked him to wait. Approximately 30 minutes later, the mother heard her daughter scream from the house and sounded the alarm and rushed to her aid. The appellant tried to flee the house but was apprehended by the father and the sons, and the mother went inside the room to find her lying naked on the ground and bleeding from her genitalia. The clothing of the victim was torn and covered in blood. According to the victim, when questioned, she said that the appellant came to the house and asked about the brothers before closing the door on her, falling on her, gagging her, and raping her. According to the prosecution, the uncle of the victim called the sub-inspector of the police and the Mahanandi police station of 10 am. The cousins of the brothers and the victim hurried over. The circle inspector of police Nandyal Rural Police Station, who had just arrived, was given the appellant by the residents. The mother of the victim gave the police a formal report which received the designation 28 or 2011, and the victim was taken to the government hospital by the mother, where she was examined by the civil surgeon of the district hospital. The accused was first found guilty by the sessions judge, and the verdict was then maintained by the High Court. To analyze the case of Patan Jamal Wali versus the state of Andhra Pradesh, it deals with the rape of a visually impaired woman who belongs to a scheduled caste. The Supreme Court upheld the decision of the High Court and the Sessions Court as far as the conviction of the accused was under the Section 376 of the IPC was concerned, and stated that the crime had not been proved beyond any reasonable doubt. The court textually interpreted the law at hand and set aside the conviction under the SC/ST Act. However, it can be argued that in view of the social background of the parties and the gruesome nature of the crime involved in the present case, the court should have adopted a prudential interpretation of the law instead of abiding by the technical requirements. The women who belong to the scheduled caste and face physically disabled have only been marginalized in society but have not been provided with dignified place in the mainstream law and policy. The Patan Jamalwala case court lays down a sense of intersectionality and acknowledges the disadvantages faced on more than one ground, but contradicts itself by failing to apply the concept in an Indian setting of prevalent of sexism and casteism. It has established by the facts that the accused was a regular visitor and a close acquaintance of the victim's family. Hence, it can be reasonably construed that the accused was aware of the victim's caste. It was pointed out that it was in a rural setting it was accused had not known that the girl belonged to a scheduled caste, he would not have dared to force himself upon her, especially by entering a house when the mother was right outside the room. It is evident that the accused considered the girl to be vulnerable owing to her disability and her caste, based on which he committed the violent act. Under a section titled Different Hues of Intersectionality, the court stated that the discrimination faced by the woman who belonged to the scheduled caste is starkly different from what that the upper caste woman would face. Hence, the adoption of the single axis framework of law can in no way do justice to a woman who is disadvantaged at different levels in the hierarchy. Applying to the dominant interpretation of law, which is based on the experience of privileged members, discrediting the problems of those who are marginalized on several grounds. A similar reference can be seen in the theories of intersectionality that concern black women. Black feminism argues that rape of a black woman cannot be categorized solely sexually or solely racially. The fact that it is historically used as a tool of political repression cannot be ignored. On similar ground, acts of violence against women of scheduled caste are not exclusive and the repercussions of patriarchy. They should also be viewed as an attempt to reinforce caste biases and legitimize the power hierarchy that accompanies them. However, with respect to the present case, it stated that the prosecution has not provided enough evidence to provide that the crime falls under Section 3 of the SC/ST Act, thus setting a high bar of evidence itself for deeply entrenched social biases which cannot possibly have a materialistic proof. The court chose to deny the interplay of caste and power in rural politics where caste biases are not even conceived. It is unfortunate that the underlying conditions in our society do not act enough evidence for a woman to provide that she is disadvantaged on the basis of her caste apart from her gender. When the Supreme Court had an opportunity to adopt a prudential and more instrumental approach, it has defined to constitute a more important milestone by setting another precedent, not just based on denial and ignorance.
Alright, now that Anindya has given us an apt analysis of the facts and judgment of the deeply unfortunate case of Patan Jamal Walis versus State of Andhra Pradesh, I plan on analyzing the case through the lens of Brahminical patriarchy and how it is manifested in this very case. To provide some context to the audience, coined by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Brahminical patriarchy is a structural concept. It's also known as graded inequality, which explains a specific modality of patriarchy by explicitating a set of discriminatory levels constituting a hierarchical organization of society based on caste. This is something that's very unique to the Indian subcontinent, and that is exactly why it applies to the case at hand. The hierarchical structure of this concept places upper caste men as the most privileged, upper caste women as slightly less privileged, lower caste men are considered to be more deprived, while lower caste women are considered the least privileged, and all other identities simply fit themselves somewhere between this framework. This is where it gets very important to note that the concept of Brahminical patriarchy doesn't necessarily mean that the patriarchy is being practiced by Brahmins alone, but it refers to the system of patriarchy in various forms that women are subjected to. Anyone, regardless of their caste or gender, who believes, practices, preaches, or encourages any kind of discrimination based on this hierarchical structure would be considered a contributor towards Brahminical patriarchy by definition. The perpetrator in the case of Patan Jamalwale's state of Andhra Pradesh was not a Brahmin. However, there is a very strong prevalence of power dynamics that exist due to the caste of the victim, and that is the very issue that Brahminical patriarchy as a concept brings to light to society. While the Sessions judge in his judgment claimed that the prosecution failed to prove that the accused committed the offence on the ground of the caste of the victim, we believe that if viewed through the lens of Brahminical patriarchy, the victim's caste is something extremely relevant. Her belonging to the Mardiga of the scheduled class significantly reduces her visibility in society when it comes to being crimes committed against women. This is a case where her caste, class, gender, and additionally her disability come together and intertwine and reduce her visibility in society and the legal system to a considerable amount. Her caste subjected her to be seen as more expendable in the eyes of the perpetrator, as women of lower caste, due to their need to take part in labor outside of their homes, are already seen as lacking in honor and thus justifiable to exploit. Her class, which refers to her economic condition, was already bleak, which implies that her access to justice would be limited. And lastly, her gender, which is what subjected her to sexual violence in the first place. Additionally, her being blind was another reason that the perpetrator decided to prey on her, making her seem even more vulnerable to crime and even seen as more sexually available simply due to her vulnerability. All these factors together resulted in the crime. This is exactly why intersectionality is extremely important and is something that cannot be ignored by our judicial system, because weighing out cases through a singular framework is what results in the further exacerbation of such crimes. This case brings out the crucial need for evaluation of difference in the marginalization of lower caste women in India, and further on brings to light the flaws within the feminist movement in India, where the difference in discrimination towards lower caste women is simply not brought to attention enough and is constantly sidelined. This, instead of positively bringing up and empowering women through feminism, results in the movement being counterintuitive towards lower caste women and is something that will be further talked about by Pratyaksh.
Thanks, Saheyba, for emphasizing on why Brahminical patriarchy should be mitigated from the mainstream feminism and shouldn't be the one narrative of feminism out there. But at the same time, we should also understand importance of adding Dalit feminist narrative to mainstream feminism. The idea of mainstream feminism has been the narrative of societal change that we have seen so far. However, the main contention raised is that the narrative often neglects the section of intersectionality that have gone unanswered, which includes the addressment of complexities of identity beyond gender. I am agreeing that gender is crucial axis of feminist movements, but we still as a society are overlooking the factors of class and caste, which perpetuates inequality within feminist movement. In my opinion, the incorporation of marginalized caste feminism into mainstream feminism is crucial for achieving true gender equality and social justice, as emphasized by Colin. Dalit feminism highlights the intersecting operation faced by Dalit women, including caste, gender, and class discrimination, and therefore the need for integration of marginalized community perspective in mainstream feminism becomes more inclusive and intersectional. addressing the diverse experiences and struggles of all women. This integration also challenges caste-based hierarchies within feminist movements and promotes solidarity across different marginalized groups, ultimately strengthening the feminist movement, making it more effective in advocating for the rights and empowerment of all women. From this viewpoint, intersectionality, as eliminated before, challenges the notion of single access framework as stated by Mary E. John, emphasizing that individual traverse multiple dimensions of identity concurrently, rejecting the categorization based on simplicity. This can be seen as an approach based on inclusivity, ensuring that the acknowledgement addresses the diverse experience of all individuals. Also, pointing out that the Black feminist theory is a Eurocentric theory, and further, the need of having the flexibility in the theory of feminism to incorporate and recognize the people who fall between the cracks. Sharmila Reggie visits the historical evolution of feminist discourse starting from First World Feminism, Black feminism to the introduction of Sadian framework in feminism. Here, I will also be raising the point on Black feminism, which stands as a plaintive example of intersectionality, anchoring the idea of feminism within the context of race. Similarly, in India, we can see that the idea of feminism intersect with casteism, where the two important factors, gender and battle of caste-based oppression, intervene, and the recognition of the intervening factor is imperative as the more comprehensive understanding of the issues of social justice is fostered here.
I agree. Yes, in my opinion, current laws are formed in such a way that factors like gender-based violence and caste-based discrimination are seen and addressed separately. Although legislators might argue that addressing different forms of oppression under single ambit of law might be an impossible task, and there is a necessity of creating a distinct boundary between the laws. Judiciary, however, can take a more inclusive and comprehensive approach by looking at cases that involve various aspects of social discrimination. That dichotomy of caste and gender-based discrimination has always existed in our society. Often, caste prejudices can overshadow shared experiences of gender discrimination and marginalization, and vice versa. For example, our reservation system has reservation for women, lower caste and disabled separately. But we also have to try and understand that women who are disabled and belong to the lower caste might be in the most need of inclusivity in the society. In my view, legal remedy should be made more accessible to people. It has been seen that people from lower caste find it difficult to access legal institutions and hire lawyers, and it gets even more difficult for a woman from a lower caste to get justice when a crime is committed against her. It is also seen that less attention is paid to cases of sexual harassment against Dalit women, as one of the reasons for this may be lack of media coverage. We don't see a lot of such cases because upper caste people are in the positions of power and have connects to media houses, who do not find the rape of a lower caste woman as a matter of significance to the society. People from lower caste are usually focused more on their own survival, which makes watching or reading news an insignificant part of their lives. Most of the influential viewers and readers of news are from the upper caste section of the society. This creates a fear in the minds of the media houses that reporting a rape of a lower caste woman might result in fall of their viewership and attract disapproval from their viewers. Our courts, apart from strict application of statute to the case in hand, should also try and understand the reason at the backdrop of the case that may have led to the commitment of the case. In case of caste-based harassment of women, awareness must be created not only among the upper caste but also among lower caste men, because somewhere violence against women can be understood as fueled by feminist oppression by men irrespective of their caste, encouraging caste-based feminist violence and oppression by the upper caste men. Further elaborating on caste-based gender violence, upper caste usually live in separate areas from the lower caste. Upper caste usually live in elite gated societies with security and proper access to sanitation. Upper caste women travel in private and public vehicles freely, and the surrounding areas in which they live have proper surveillance and security, whereas lower caste women live in slums and jhuggi jhopris, which makes them prone to attacks like the one faced by Patan. They don't have access to covered washrooms and are not even allowed to travel in the same public transport as the upper caste, forcing them to walk from their work at odd hours in most times, making them vulnerable and unsafe. Although different forms of oppression are discussed in schools, modules related to intersectionality should be included to make people understand things like gender, caste, disability comprehensively. Things like intercaste marriage and inclusive communities should also be encouraged. Whenever there is caste, class, or religion based violence, women become the easy target of it. It needs to be understood by the society that in many cases, caste or class or disability, and in few cases, all of them together form the backdrop of a crime such as sexual harassment. Only a comprehensive and all-round approach with the backdrop of the case in mind and intersectionality of various oppressive forms would provide true justice to the victim and help create awareness. Thank you.